Gang, what's up? Just Ehren right here, Question Period Canada. Pretty excited to show you these. These are the highlights from today's Question Period. There is no doubt we have one of the most entertaining forms of government going these days. Take a look.
This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Indeed, his carbon tax, which the Parliamentary Budget Officer has proven costs 60% of Canadians more than they get back in rebates, is now opposed by 70% of Canadians. Everybody understands that the tax is driving people to the food bank. That's why 6 premiers, including the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, have asked for a meeting. Will he agree to a televised carbon tax conference if he's so sure of himself on this issue?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed that 8 out of 10 families across the country get more money with the Canada Carbon Rebate attached to the price on pollution than it costs them. That's $1,800 arriving for a family of 4 in Alberta. It's thousands of dollars right across the country. These are things that are helping people with the high cost of living and groceries at the same time as we fight climate change. But Mr. Speaker, what would be also helpful is if we were able to deliver the doubling of the rural top-up to put hundreds of dollars in the pockets of Canadians, but the Conservative Party is blocking the legislation to double the rural top-up.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that is mathematically impossible, given that the NDP Liberal government has a combined majority and can pass anything it wants, which is exactly why we're in such a mess today as a country. After 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and that's why the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirms 60% of Canadians are paying more in carbon taxes than getting back in rebates. But why doesn't the Prime Minister, if he believes the contrary, why doesn't he have the courage to sit down in a televised and open forum and have a carbon tax conference with the premiers?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We did sit down with the premiers 8 years ago and established the Pan-Canadian Framework on Climate Change that both puts a price on pollution and puts more money back in the pockets out of 8 of 10 Canadian families in the jurisdictions where the federal backstop applies. That is a way of both fighting climate change and helping with affordability. Now, not only are the Conservative Party counting on taking away those Canada Carbon Rebate checks, they're arriving this coming Monday on April 15th. People will see in their bank accounts the Canada Carbon Rebate that puts more money in their pockets ahead of the costs associated with fighting climate change.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he met the premiers in 2016. Since that time, he's broken the promise he made them. He said the tax would only go up to 11 cents a litre. Now, he admits it will go up to 61 cents a litre. He said the tax would make people better off. Now we have the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report, which confirms 60% of Canadians pay more than they get back. The Prime Minister said, and I quote in 2015, "Canadians need a PM who will meet with the premiers." What happened?
Continues with his misinformation and disinformation. The reality is the Parliamentary Budget Officer said that 8 out of 10 Canadians do better with our price on pollution and the Canada Carbon Rebate. But speaking of misinformation and disinformation, any responsible leader that receives an endorsement and support from proven conspiracy theorist and liar Alex Jones would have immediately denounced that. But that's not what the Leader of the Opposition did. He did absolutely nothing because those kinds of endorsements fit within his political strategy.
Climate deny, Mr. Climate delay, strike again. The Corporate Knights report shows that the Prime Minister is delaying $15 billion that he promised to hardworking Canadians to lower their costs and their emissions. Yet the Prime Minister has no problem finding $18.6 billion in free subsidies for big oil and gas. So why is it that the Prime Minister wants to put shoulder the burden of the climate crisis on hardworking people and not give them a hand, but wants to give billions of dollars, like the Conservatives, to big oil and gas corporations.
Efficient fuel and gas subsidies, oil and gas subsidies, 2 years ahead of all of our partners around the world. We're going to continue to do that. But it's unfortunate to see that the NDP seems to be falling into the conservative misinformation trap. Our price on pollution actually puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families right across the country, particularly middle-income and low-income families, while we continue to fight climate change. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we developed a way to fight climate change and reduce emissions while putting more money in people's pockets, and we're going to keep doing that.
The incoming leader of the Liberal Party has just given a speech and given advice to his soon-to-be predecessor. He said that he agrees, this is Mark Carney, says he agrees that there should be a carbon tax conference where the premiers can come together and share their concerns about the Prime Minister raising the cost of living and breaking the back of Canadians. Will the Prime Minister won't listen to me. He won't listen to the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. Will he at least listen to his successor and meet the premiers on the carbon tax?
Order. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, it is important for folks, for Canadians who are watching this debate, to be careful about the misinformation being spewed by the Leader of the Opposition. It is important for a responsible government in this country to have a plan for addressing climate change and do so in a manner that enhances and addresses affordability concerns. That is exactly what the price on pollution does. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back. 200 economists across the country agree with us. It is such a shame that we have a bunch of climate deniers over there who have no plan for the environment and no plan for the economy.
I ask all members, please, to only take the mic, only take the floor when they're recognized by the Speaker. I'll recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Mark Carney, who is the next Liberal leader, is a fierce supporter of the carbon tax. He's been called Carbon Tax Carney in the past, and he is willing at least to defend his carbon tax views in front of the premiers. The Prime Minister is not. He's running for cover and hiding from Canadians, refusing to defend his own policy decisions. If the Prime Minister is really so proud of his plan to hike the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, why won't he listen to Mark Carney and have a big, open, televised carbon tax conference?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very interesting that the Leader of the Opposition seems so fond of Mark Carney these days, who actually, as you say, does believe in a price on pollution. Perhaps the Leader of the Opposition should listen to him. But it is important with respect to the premiers to know that the premiers have every right to submit a plan that actually meets the federal benchmark and put in place their own price on pollution. That is something that British Columbia has done. That is something that Quebec has done. Mr. Speaker, Premier Moe was actually here recently and testified before the committee. And what Premier Moe said is he looked at alternatives to the price on pollution. He found every one of them to be too expensive. This from a guy who has no climate plan,
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Last week, the Prime Minister increased the carbon tax by 23% on Canadians, on gas, on groceries, on home heating. He's doubling down and defying 70% of Canadians and 8 premiers who want him to axe the tax. 6 of those premiers wrote the Prime Minister asking for a meeting to talk about his punishing carbon tax. Instead, the Prime Minister just shot down the idea because they already had a meeting 8 years ago. Can the Prime Minister tell us how many premiers he met in 2016 that are still in power today?
The Honourable Minister for Families and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, actions speak louder than words. On this side of the House, our actions, over 750,000 families benefiting from affordable childcare spaces, over 100,000 new spaces across the country, 7 million children whose parents benefit from the Canada Child Benefit, a national school food policy. There are actions, Mr. Speaker, vote against funding to increase the number of spaces. Vote against a national school food policy, Mr. Speaker. They've made it clear they're not there for Canadian families.
Speaker, I don't know if she missed the question, but Canadians certainly missed the answer. It's zero. 2016 is the last time he had a meeting. Pokemon Go, dabbing, Harambe, that's what was popular in 2016. And you can get an apartment for half the price. Since the last time the Prime Minister had a meeting with the premiers, gas and groceries have skyrocketed and interest rates have increased 10 times over. So will he put aside his desperation and defiance, do some work around here, and meet the premiers?
Then the Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Speaker, what Canadians will see today is one thing they will not hear from these conservative, Mr. Speaker, is the cost of inaction. The cost of forest fire, Mr. Speaker, the cost of flooding in our country, the cost of drought, Mr. Speaker. When each of these conservatives are standing up, they're telling Canadians they have no plan, Mr. Speaker, to fight climate change. On this side of the House, we recognize, like all Canadians, we need to act to save the planet. We need to act on climate change. That's why we're going to invest in Canadian. That's why we're going to continue to invest to make sure that we have a planet to live for our children.
This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. The Prime Minister raised his carbon tax 23% last week, driving up the cost of gas and groceries. Fortunately, Conservative Bill C-234 will exempt farmers' grain drying and barn heating from the carbon tax so food remains affordable. Will the Prime Minister lower costs on farmers and make food cheaper by passing Bill C-234 in its original form?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, it's important to actually ensure that we're dealing with the facts. 97% of on-farm fuels are actually exempt from the price on pollution, and there is a rebate to address farmers and farm incomes on a go-forward basis. In Canada, 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back. In fact, Professor Dalter at the University of Regina, who the honourable member might want to go talk to, called out the Conservatives last week for misinformation. When Conservative leader and his ally and the Conservative leader's ally, Scott Moe, appeared before committee on the carbon price, journalists called his appearance a parade of nonsense and completely dishonest. Conservative slogans and misinformation do not help Canadians with affordability.
The Honourable Member from Regina, Wisconsin.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the Prime Minister is not going to back down from his carbon tax obsession. It's clear that he is going to continue to raise the carbon tax on gas, groceries, and home heating and make life even more expensive for Canadians. Since the Prime Minister refuses to call a carbon tax election, will he at least meet with the premiers and listen to their plans to make life more affordable?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Speaker, as the honourable member knows full well, provinces and territories can put in place their own price on pollution. That is what British Columbia has done. That is what Quebec has done. Those provinces that are actually committed to fighting change. But the honourable member comes from a province that has no climate plan, no climate targets. Their premier admits that the price on pollution is the most cost-effective way to reduce emissions, and yet he does nothing. That's a shame. Shame.
It's about putting food on the table. I'm proud to be part of a government that believes that hungry kids should have food on the table. I'm proud to be part of a government that's taking action to implement a school food program so those hungry kids are able to eat when they go to school. It's unbelievable to me to hear this rhetoric from the Conservative opposition when they have the gall to stand up and vote against putting food on the table for hungry kids. They talk a big game, but when they have a chance to do anything to put the food on the table for my constituents, they oppose at every turn. We'll do what it takes to help working class families and middle class families and kids when it comes to putting food on the table.
The Honourable Member from Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, that minister is so out of touch because here are the facts. After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, we have a record-smashing 2 million Canadians using a food bank in a single month, with over 1 million more expected this year. Food banks like the one in Cambridge are now seeing dual-income families, full-time working Canadians, and our seniors lining up at the food banks. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will this Prime Minister finally show some compassion and make food cheaper for Canadians by passing Bill 234 in its original form?
Great job.
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Speaker, The mums and dads across this country that we've been helping, I worry for them, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition has been very clear, and his actions are all we need to know, all we need to point to. We point to their opposition of a motion and a vote to support a national school food program. Can point to their opposition and a vote to oppose expanding funding for more childcare to help families out. Mr. Speaker, their actions are clear. They will cut, cut, cut.
The honourable member.
The NDP Liberal government and the Prime Minister's 23% carbon tax is not worth the cost. The Prime Minister doesn't understand. If you tax the farmer who grows the food, you end up taxing the family who buys it. People are struggling in New Brunswick. 40 to 50 military families need to visit Gagetown Food Bank just to feed their kids. Now, UNB had to create their own food bank to feed their students. Will the Prime Minister lower costs on farmers and make food cheaper by passing Bill 234 in its original form?
Take seriously the honourable member's criticism when he and his party voted against a pay raise for the men and women who serve this country in uniform. When we go to this chamber every day, we have an opportunity to stand up for policies that help middle-class families put food on the table. When we cut taxes for the middle class and raise it on the wealthiest 1%, they voted against it. When we stopped sending childcare checks to the wealthiest people in this country so we could put more in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, they voted against it. And now they want to justify their climate denialism from taking hundreds of dollars from families who live in our communities. It's not right, Mr. Speaker. We're going to do what it takes to help people.
And you tax the trucker who hauls the food, then you hurt the families who buy the food. Things have gotten so bad under this Liberal NDP carbon tax coalition that military families stationed in Borden and Gagetown are having to be using food banks. And troops training right here in Ottawa are relying on food donations from college staff. After 8 long years, this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower the cost on Canadian farmers and make food more affordable for all Canadians by passing Bill C-234 in its original form immediately?
I share the concern about the welfare of every member of the Canadian Armed Forces. You know, we work very hard to make sure that our forces receive all of the supports in housing and in financial supports that they require to do the important mission that they perform for all of us in this country. And Mr. Speaker, we recently negotiated, for example, a very substantial pay raise because they've earned it and they deserved it. And that's why it was such a huge disappointment when that member and all of his colleagues voted against the money for that pay raise. Mr. Speaker, we have a responsibility in this House to support the men and women who protect our country.
Conservatives have offered a common-sense solution to fix the upcoming budget. When will this Prime Minister stop his out-of-control deficits with a dollar-for-dollar rule? Find $1 in savings for every new dollar he spends.
Since from the Conservative, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what we're presenting Canadian is a plan to build more homes, Mr. Speaker. What we're presenting Canadian is a plan to create more jobs. Mr. Speaker, what we're presenting to Canadian is a plan for prosperity. On the other side of the House, Mr. Speaker, it's slogans. Canadians at home understand that slogans don't create jobs. Slogans don't build homes. Slogans don't build prosperity, Mr. Speaker. We'll let them invent a new slogan while we focus on the matters of Canadians.
Government's addiction to spending is out of control. They're getting high off an unsafe supply of drugs and borrowed money. Their spending habit is driving up inflation. Interest rate cuts might be stalled because of out-of-control spending. Their far-left allies in BC just had their credit rating cut. This Prime Minister and his socialist coalition are not worth the cost. This government must find $1 in savings for every dollar spent. Will the Prime Minister cap spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule to bring...
The member opposite continues to ask questions but not really focus on what her party has continuously done, which is vote against measures to support Canadians time and time again. 120 votes prior to the holidays, all-night voting, voting against children, voting against supports for families, and voting against our military, Mr. Speaker. So we will take no lessons from the Conservatives in terms of supporting Canadians because our government will always be there for them.
This Prime Minister continues to demonstrate that he's not worth the cost. This government has added more to the national debt than all previous prime ministers combined. Yes, combined. And now a leading economist has stated that interest rates cuts are being delayed because of this massive government overspending. Wow. Will the Prime Minister cap government spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule, which finds $1 of savings for every dollar of new spending, so that interest rates come down and people can stay in their homes?
Great, John. 8%, down 2 months in a row below 3%, AAA credit rating, Mr. Speaker, and just in the last 9 months, a food program for students in school. We're going to make sure that there's homes built across this country. How did that member and his Ontario colleagues vote when it came for the plant in St. Thomas? How did they vote when it came to support the Ford plant? They voted against. We're here for Canadians. That's what they expect. We're going to do that each and every day.
Investments in Alberta, Mr. Speaker, so Albertans can access the tools of the 21st century. Today, just under 90% of Albertans have access to high-speed internet. In March, I was there to announce 14 projects to connect over 22,000 homes, 3,400 Indigenous homes, all in rural Alberta. This $112 million investment is in partnership with the province as part of our commitment to connect all Canadians by 2030. We will always stick up for Albertans, Mr. Speaker, and my colleague from Calgary Skyward always sticks up for Albertans and his constituents too. Thank you.
Brunt of the climate crisis, with damage caused by flooding and the fear of wildfire evacuations, all while the Liberals are rewarding the very people who are getting rich off it. Liberals gave over $18 billion to rich oil and gas companies last year. And today, we found out they broke $15 billion in climate promises. They announced $15 billion just for the photo ops. Why is it that the Liberals have no problem rewarding Canada's biggest polluters, but they won't invest in our children's?
As she knows, I was an environmental activist for many years, and in my years, we could only dream of a federal government that would invest tens of billions of dollars in the transition to fight climate change, to create the jobs and the economy of the 21st century, Mr. Speaker. We have committed more than $100 billion since 2015 in the fight against climate change. That's not double what had been done before. That's not 4 times more that had been done before. That's not 10 times more. It's 20 times more.
Wow.
That has never been done before in Canada in terms of investment to fight climate change and create the opportunities of the 21st century.
Yeah, gang. So my name's Ehren. Just to explain, we watch Canadian politics here. I'm trying to learn about Canadian politics, and while I learn, I share with the people that watch my channel. That's it. We have a blast. We watch all the broadcasts of the daily question periods, and it's pretty fun. Gets out of hand sometimes, but that's part of the fun. Come join us. Our crew is pretty amazing. I think you'll like our community. Come check it out. Give it a test. If you like that chat stuff, we're kind of on spot. And on top of these Canadian politics and politicians, these guys aren't getting away from us. We've got our eyes on them. I'm Ehren. Question Period Canada. Like, subscribe, share, comment, do all that fun stuff. It's great. Make sure you watch one of the live shows. Check out a video. That'd be amazing. We'll catch you next one. Thanks for watching.